You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research.
Hello and welcome to the Sound Money Show from Casey Research with me, your host, Andy Duncan. It's my great pleasure today to be speaking with Dennis Miller, the editor of Miller's Money Forever. Today we'll be talking about a new financial paradigm, baby boomer retirement, and a new investment strategy for retirees. Hello, Dennis.
Hi, Andy. How are you doing today?
Brilliant. Now, retirement in the United States and most of the Western world has changed radically since 2008. Can you tell us what these major changes are?
Well, Andy, that's a good question because all of us saved up for our retirement under a certain set of guidelines and principles. And one of the principles I like to fall back on was the old 100 minus your age, which meant if you were 65, you would take 65% of your income and put it in fixed, safe, interest-bearing things like certificate of deposits, treasuries, utility bonds, things like that. And then the smaller portion, you'd go into the market to offset inflation. Well, since 2008, the interest rates have cratered. They now call this the zero interest rate policy. And what that really means is if you were to go and buy a treasury or a CD or something like that today, a long term, your interest rates are lower than the inflation rate after taxes. So you buy one of those, it's a guaranteed loser. So for the investor, what that really means is 2/3 of what you used to consider to be safe investments in 2007 are now the kind of investments that are going to give you a negative, not keeping you up with inflation, rather, and could produce some catastrophic losses, rather, as inflation continues to rise. So the board game has changed. 2/3 of the safe investments are off the table.
Now, lots of American baby boomers are currently coming up for retirement. What effects are all of those changes going to cause for them?
Well, it's interesting because, if you read John Malden's book, he said that the technical term is that they are screwed, okay? Now, Andy, I don't necessarily disagree with him, but I also happen to believe they're only screwed if they keep doing what they used to do. They're confused. The old way of doing things is turning out to be the exact wrong thing to do now. So what they're going to have to understand is that the entire paradigm has changed. And let me talk about some of the negative effects, for example. Pensions and annuities are one good example because, a lot of the insurance companies and the people that provide annuities are required to have a percentage of their investments in those safe fixed investments that I talked about earlier. Well, as a result, if you're sitting there with an annuity, a variable annuity specifically, where your amount of monthly payment goes up or down based on their investment results, I'm hearing stories of people taking 30 and 40% cuts in the payments that they were getting from their insurance companies because they're not getting those returns either. Now, at the same time, try retiring at 60 at today's interest rates. And if you're not careful, it's down close to 25% in 10 years, meaning that inflation has eaten away about 25% of your buying power in the last 10 years. And at the same time, your taxes and your fixed expenses are going up. So the effect that it's having on baby boomers there as far as fixed income products is they're going to have to find a way to invest in other areas so that they can stay ahead of the inflationary curve. And right now, everybody understands pretty well that the stock market is in a huge bubble and it's being held up by the Federal Reserve. And basically, you have no other place to go, and the consensus is everybody thinks they're going to be the person that can get out of the market when the crash comes ahead of everybody else. That's a little bit unnerving.
Now, if the paradigm has changed then, and you can't put 65% of your money into AAA-rated bonds and money market CDs, what's your new kind of strategy for dealing with this new financial paradigm?
That's an interesting question that you've asked, because we've been doing our model portfolio now for a little over a year. So unlike the typical newsletters where they've had a portfolio for several years, we've been building up our portfolio. And what we've come to realize is this. The first thing we've had to do is we've had to sit down and understand who we are really trying to address. The retiree, the baby boomer that's accumulating retirement funds. This is money that we cannot afford to lose. So we have to start out with the overall, almost like that insurance umbrella of avoiding catastrophic risk. Well, when you start to look at it from that perspective, then you start to work both ends against the middle. Well, if we can't have 65%, matter of fact, we shouldn't have anything in investments that we know are not going to beat inflation. So now we have all this cash available. Well, 10% in the market, 20, 30, 40, 50% in the market. What's the right allocation in today's market that's going to minimize our risk and give us the best possible return? And what we found is that if you put together the right recipe for a retirement portfolio, you can probably do it with 50% in the market, with a whole bunch of safety and circuit breakers built in, even including who you select. Then you have to go to the other side where you're looking for some more aggressive income with tremendous safety, and that's the Doug Casey mantra: look where other people are not looking. And then you also have to have around 20% in some real safe income that doesn't have the inflation risk attached to it. And if you put the three together, you can do it. It just takes a lot more work than it's ever done in the past.
So how do you square the circle then, Dennis? How do you get good safety and a good return? Can you describe three of the kind of investments that you're kind of making in your portfolio and how you put these circuit breakers in?
Well, we happen to have a very stringent set of criteria that we look for in investments. We want to make sure, and let's talk specifically about stocks. Are the stocks safe? Are the companies safe? Do they have a history of not only paying their dividend and increasing their dividend? Do they have an international presence, which is going to mitigate some inflation of the U.S. dollar? But then we also go one step further, and that is we go back to when Mr. Bernanke uttered the word taper back in the summer, and the market cratered. Some of these investments now have had so much money pile into them. They have great interest rate sensitivity, like bonds, and the minute the interest rates start to go up, people are bailing, and it's bringing the stock price down. So we have to address that parameter, that we're not just jumping into a high dividend payer that's going to tank the minute the interest rates start to turn around. So that's the selection process. The second process, as far as the circuit breakers are, then you have to have position limits. In a retiree's portfolio, no more than 5% of your portfolio in any given stock. We recommend a 20% trailing stop. So if the worst case scenario comes through, you'd only lose 1% of your portfolio on that issue if you have got yourself stopped out. We're adjusting those stops periodically, particularly as we're starting to see our portfolio rise. And then we have similar circuit breakers when we get into the bonds. It's called duration, where for every 1% increase in interest, the resale value of the bond drops. So we have to look for the duration parameters that won't cause us catastrophic losses. So it's the selection process of the asset that you're buying with the circuit breakers in place so that if the market turns on you, you can minimize those losses before you get hurt badly. You can do it. Just takes a lot of work, Andy.
Yeah, I know, because I used to immunize duration bonds myself in the past in another life. So do you think your new portfolio is bulletproof then?
Well, I like to use that term bulletproof. As a former Marine, I know that bulletproof is doggone safe, okay? But also as a Marine, I will tell you that nuclear trumps all. Bulletproof is the absolute safest you can be under the conditions that you're involved in now. And when we have factored in all the elements, our model portfolio is doing very well. We have not been in many of our investments for an entire year, and we have some really nice double-digit gains. And so that if the market turns, we're still going to be able to minimize our losses and make sure we have that money to last for our retirement. So if the market throws us another curveball, we'll have to make adjustments, but we'll still be in a position to be able to do that.
And do you include hard assets like bullion and art and real estate and so on?
Yes, we do, but we do this a little differently because those are what I call insurance type assets, in that all of us have to have what we call a core holdings. And these are the kinds of things that we hold, whether it's foreign currency, bullion, or whatever, for the point when the wheels really fall off and we need this for survival. So we talk about those, and those are where we tell our subscribers to start. Build up that core holding, but that core holding is not investment for profit. That's insurance, and those are assets you hope you never have to touch and can pass on to the next generation. But that's the foundation. You better build those before you start going into the market to begin with.
Well, if I come up to retirement soon, then I shall be on the phone to you, Dennis, to help me out. It's been really interesting talking to you today. Where can our listeners find out more about Miller's Money?
Well, thank you for asking. If they'll go to www.millersmoney.com, they will see our website, and we send them a free newsletter once a week, and then they can also see how they can go into our paid portfolio, which is one that comes out once a month. And as I said, it's doing very well, and we've managed to put together what we feel comfortable with, a bulletproof combination of the recipe of the right mix that's going to get the job done.
Thank you for your time today, Dennis Miller.
Thank you for having me, Andy. It's been a pleasure.
Subscribe to Sound Money Radio on iTunes. You can also visit us online at caseyresearch.com/sound-money, where you can subscribe to our mailing list and listen to all of our podcasts. If you enjoyed the show today and learned something new, please tell your friends all about us to help us grow this podcast. Finally, a very special thank you to Dennis Miller for joining us on the show, and thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.